In this hour, in our weird and wonderful feature, my favorite guru, Guru Sbuddha, is here. Some of you know him as Savyasachi Das Prabhu. Yeah? Yeah. And we're going to be talking about yet another age-old conversation. Spirituality, religion. And I think in my opening in the previous hour, I said spirituality versus religion. And it doesn't have to be versus. Yeah? It can, we can have that conversation, but it doesn't have to be a conversation that is a violent comparative study of the two ideas. The idea here is to understand what each is, and then you decide. Wait, it's not fighting. Especially when I've got men of the cloth in the studio here, trying to teach us the right way of doing things. Sbuddha, are you well?
I'm well, probably.
Listen, I'm going to take a quick break because of load shedding, we're not having air conditioning.
Okay.
Hey, Yashi-san. It's hot. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, Guru Sbuddha talks to us about spirituality and religion.
A debate is supposed to give a chance for the other side to hear the other argument so that we can find some middle path, or at least we understand where you are and we see if we don't want to engage or not. Mind you, it's a lot about winning. You must take my point. Don't miss what I'm...
Weird and wonderful.
Savyasachi Das Prabhu, known as Savya the monk, known even more in this studio as Sbuddha the monk. Are you well, my brother?
I'm well, Aubrey.
So good to have you on the show. The conversation about spirituality and religion is an age-old conversation. It's been happening for thousands of years. In fact, maybe even longer. How do we even start that conversation? Because there are people who are completely devoted. Yeah?
Yes.
Because they are deeply spiritual. And practice certain religious rites or practice certain religion because of their deep spirituality. But we know that there are also incidents where people who have so invested their lives in ritual and form, but have lost the meaning behind it, such that the ritual and the form in and of itself becomes the meaning, and that becomes a little bit hollow. And so the conversation goes. Talk to me about, and you tell me where you want to start. Talk to me about spirituality and religion.
Thank you, Aubrey, and good evening to all the listeners. I think you've started the conversation at a very powerful point, because it is about the individual, and the individual is seeking certain outcomes, and hopefully they can enter into a religious or spiritual space with a goal in mind. So what tends to happen is that different individuals are at different levels of consciousness or awareness, and therefore they come into religion with certain outcomes in mind. First, I would like to just put it out there that people can come to religion out of fear. The age-old fear is that God is up in the sky and he's ready to punish those who do wrong. So I don't want to get the wrath of God. Let me find a religion. Others may think, well, I've heard of God. He's wealthy and rich. He's all powerful. I have many desires I'd like to fulfill. So Fago Zubona, let me go there and I'll really put in the work to get something material. Another level of approach is persons who are thinking, I've already been provided the facility of life. I have a working mind, working senses, there's air to breathe. Maybe I have a duty towards the Supreme who has provided all these facilities for me. So as a good child, let me do my part to go every now and then to worship or to thank God. And then highest we would say is people who are approaching because they have a desire to know the person who has provided everything, and they want to relate to God in a loving, in a serving mood.
And perhaps a personal
Yes.
relationship, yeah?
They want something personal.
Right.
So now, because of these different approaches and sort of motives, people enter these spaces and then manifest different behaviors. Like you have mentioned how, when we talk about religion, generally, people may say, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Some people say, I'm religious, but not spiritual. So religion has now this connotation where there's so many rules that will control me. I lose my ability to think independently. I become like a mouthpiece for certain powers. And so they don't want to lose autonomy. And so they think, let me stay away from that. And spirituality is generally understood as being very inclusive, a non-judgmental space where we are cultivating a sort of oneness. And so both spaces, depending on the consciousness of those who approach, can be abused. And for the person who's looking from the outside may see so-and-so devoted religionist, for example, who sees that if I perform these rituals, I gain some sort of respect, some notoriety, and therefore they become very adept at the form, at ticking the boxes, only to increase their own sort of sense of worth and sort of pride in the world. But then when it comes to the practical behavior, which has to be demonstrated by one who's evolving or becoming advanced on a religious path, that is lacking. And so people think, why should I get involved with this? Let me not get involved. So I would first frame it as there is a goal to be attained, and people do experience some sort of glimpses of it in everyday life, some spiritual experience, people may say. But then there is a process which must be followed for one to evolve spiritually, to transform, to come to a higher consciousness.
Give us a call. 011-883-0702 is the number to dial. Your understanding of spirituality, your understanding of religion. Sbuda, I have watched people in their devotional religious acts and have been absolutely awe-inspired. When I watch the Shambe, for example, when they dance in a particular way, the dances that signify the impetus of creation, the movement, the devotion of the move up onto the mountain, it's inspiring, it's beautiful, the organizedness of it all. The throngs of people that are acting in one accord is beautiful to watch. When I watch, for example, my Pentecostal grandmother pray at night or in the morning, and how she somehow has some deep connection as she intercedes for everybody in the home, in the family, I'm moved by that moment. When I watch, for example, Buddhist monks in prayer, they make those symbols with them, or maybe one of them is passed on. They've got this ritual of playing with the sand and creating intricate, beautiful patterns through different
mandalas.
Is it mandalas? What is it called?
Yeah, it's called mandalas.
Oh, it's it's beautiful stuff. It's part of their religious practice. It's beautiful stuff. When I watch the Jewish people stand at the Wailing Wall and pray, it moves me in ways that I have not yet understood. When I watch my Muslim brothers pray 5 times a day facing the east, it moves me. It's a most amazing thing. When I watch the Zulu in their dance, the Ndebele in their paintings, these are all acts, forms of behavior that are inspired by a particular belief system. And I'll call that religion. Right? But then there's the other side of things where I see people that are supposed to hate each other. And in a moment of pure inspiration, in a moment of inspiration where they forget about that hate and they see their humanity, each other's humanity, and help each other out. When age-old notions of right and wrong are laughed at by the humor of providence, and somebody helps somebody that they're supposed to hate. When I see a lion for one moment embrace a little fawn, then I say to myself, what's going on here? When I see the labor of somebody who's planted a seed in the ground and nurtured it over time, and a crop comes out and families are fed, wow, I think that is powerful, and I believe that is spiritual. Is there a conversation here for spiritual versus religion? Or can we have a conversation that is just about spirituality and religion without it having to be versus?
Yes, the conversation is meant to unpack both concepts, because actually they are not working against each other.
Yeah.
It's actually a continuum. In one sense, is that to get to the mountain, you have to follow a path up the mountain. So we are looking for the spiritual experience. And the spiritual experience can be said finding a sort of peace, finding connectedness, and that may come and go. And people, wherever they are, religious or not, they get these experiences, even sometimes in so-called depraved situations. Yeah. That is because everyone is a spiritual being in essence, and they're experiencing the spiritual energy that pervades everything in creation. So now you go up the mountain, you have a nice view, you feel, wow, what a spiritual experience. But then the next day you go there, you don't feel anything.
Yeah. You feel tired. Your calves are sore.
Yeah. Because it's not actually just the mountain itself that is giving you that experience. It is what is underlying the very nature that is giving the experience. So now, religion, I could speak on it in three ways. There's those institutions that are exclusivists. Their teaching would be like, this is the only way of religious expression or approaching God. And so it becomes fallacious, because how can Wits University say they are the only university that produces lawyers? All sorts of universities can produce lawyers. But then if people take that up, sometimes they go to the far end and become a bit fanatic
extremist.
and extremist.
Yeah.
Then there are the pluralists. The pluralists say that, well, there are as many parts as there are people. So that may seem like, okay, that's very inclusive. But then it also becomes more fallacious in that it becomes an argument that, well, every house that is there is a university. That means people can end up making up their own sort of parts, which may not actually give the result. There must be a good syllabus, a trusted syllabus for attaining such high goals. Then we'd have maybe what we can call the inclusivists. They are now saying that the path is one. We're all trying to realize the essence of life, the underlying principle, the governing principle of everything. We're trying to understand divinity or experience our spiritual essence. But we are at different levels of awareness as practitioners. Just like the primary school kid and the high school and the university, they are all trying to attain some high type of education. Primary school, you cannot subtract a big number from a small number. He's right in that maths. In high school, no, you can do it. In university, it even becomes further complicated. Same subject. Yeah. So we have to be given rules and regulations so that we can control our mind and senses, so that we can then focus on the subtle realm of the spiritual.
So, we're talking here about essence and form. Yeah, we're talking about, because I love the fact that you say that in essence, yeah. Then you talk about the form, and you're suggesting, if I'm understanding you correctly, that in essence, maybe the path is the same, but maybe we are locked in different forms based on the level of our consciousness about where we are in this path.
Yes, and therefore, because we are all unique and individual and have walked the journey differently, we are attracted differently to the essence. And so different religious communities are catering for certain mindsets, certain tastes, and therefore you find that there will be difference in the language of medium, of teaching, difference in the teachers, different in the rituals, the way...
the levels of reverence,
yes,
and so forth, right, yeah.
Yeah, so people tend to then focus on these differences instead of seeing that all of these forms, all of these differences are ways that different people are approaching the central idea, the central concept, which is becoming connected to divinity.
There's a beautiful contribution from Funo, or at Funo_01 says, religion is the practice of spirituality, he says. And often when there is no spiritual engagement in religion, we get misguided practitioners. Talk to me about that.
Misguided practitioner would be that we are not clear about the depth of attainment, which is developing higher virtues and qualities. We become sidetracked by the external position, power, influence, and we may approach, like the song said, "Nkulunkulu ngicela uzuka." You are approaching... Yeah, if you approach Jeff Bezos and he says, what do you want? And you say, can I have 1,000 rands? What a wasted opportunity. So we are approaching the personality of God who can give liberation, a life of eternity, knowledge and bliss. And we are simply asking for things that will perish and fade away.
But that's because of the level of awareness and consciousness that we're in.
Yes.
So, and I don't want to go into the right or wrong conversation, because it's such an exhausting conversation, the right or wrong conversation. Yes. It's really a descendants into a rabbit hole, right?
We can look at attitudes.
But here's my question. The person who asks George Bezos for 1,000 rand, when they could ask for a billion rands, is surely asking exactly what they should be asking, given the fact that that person only has that frame of reference and consciousness and awareness about who George Bezos is.
Yes.
Surely that's good.
Yes. Yes. Yeah? You are approaching,
and I'm going down the good, bad, the right, wrong, but help me understand.
Yeah, that would mean that in approaching divinity, that is always a positive step, and therefore there's always all sorts of paths, from people who find divinity in observing nature. They see the trees are powerful, they worship the trees. They see the sun is powerful, the moon, they become sun and moon worshippers.
Yeah.
Yes, they see that there are some controllers in the universe. They may go for that. The ancestor is ascended from where we are. They want to connect like that. So always approaching some authority, especially spiritual authority, is positive. But when you don't know exactly what's available, then you may undercut yourself.
How do I get to know what's available? Is that knowable?
Yes. The scriptures of the world are there and the teachers, they speak according to the mentality of the people they want to elevate at the time. Therefore,
Oh, you're gonna say that again. Say it again.
the teachers, they teach according to the mentality of those they are trying to elevate. Therefore, you get statements like, there's so much more I could tell you, but you don't have the ears. They will not give, for example, the primary school kid university calculus. You teach them according to what they can accept and what can take them to the next step.
Yeah.
So one has to look for the broader encyclopedic wisdoms. And this tradition of the Vedas, which I'm dealing with, like books like Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, you find exhaustive knowledge which really allows us to understand that it is a long path and it is there to pick up everyone from whatever level they are. So there is no conflict on the path of spiritual development. And so the religious systems are like guidelines to help us stay on the path, as the contribution was there, that religion are the practices that bring us to the spiritual state. So I would give two things here. I would say there's a spiritual experience that we're looking for. It could be emotion, so spiritual state of mind. But we want to come also to the spiritual reality. Living life as a soul, as a spiritual being. Then your point of reference is no longer your desires, your fears, your ambitions materially, but it becomes from the nature of self, which is discussed as we are always in the mood of service.
Give us a call on 011-883-0702 as I speak to Guru Savyasachi Das Prabhu. Which one do you like?
Nkomi Savya the monk.
Savya the monk. You like that one?
That's where I'm socially on social
You
media.
you don't like Smuda the Guru.
Guru Buddha is perfect also.
Yeah,
Savya the monk, Guru Buddha.
Savya the monk. Yeah. My guest, we're talking about spirituality and religion. We're speaking about spirituality versus religion. We're speaking about spirituality and religion as being part of the same continuum. Oh, I like that one. I really do. The idea that spirituality and religion can be part of the same continuum. There was a time when I was quite religious. But when I left my religious devotion, certain truths about my spirituality emerged. I wonder in this conversation whether we'll get to a point where we can talk about how devotion to a religious set of practices can inadvertently suppress a spiritual path. I found that to be true for me, but that was for me, and that cannot necessarily be true for everybody, right?
Yes.
Because there are people, I would imagine, who have found their spiritual path through a process of religious devotion. Yeah?
Yes.
And I think that is a great cosmic sense of humor. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's almost very, very humoristic. It's almost like that big joke that's been played on our amakoko. What's the right way of saying? Hey, that's my cousin. Oh, sorry, I'm just looking at something on the television. It's almost like a joke on our, in the vernacular would say amakuku, our
Treasures.
not treasures, but our condescensions. Somebody's gonna help me out. 011-883-0702. I want to take your calls straight after this, as we talk about spirituality and religion. Straight after this. That's my cousin. That's where I come from. I come from there. My house is just a few.
What's our mums?
Yeah, get some mums. Not get some mums. Come on. Gee, sorry, man. I'm looking at the television. I thought you were gonna give me a break, dude. Oh, well, that's okay. I'm looking at something on the news about what's happening in Mamelodi. I see a post office there, and I recognized the area, and I was intrigued. Wonderful stuff. 011-883-0702. You know, when I say amakuku, you know, there's a song back in the day that we used to sing at funerals. Amakuku
alelizwe ayosale mathuneni.
So that's what I mean. That those amakuku, I don't know what the English...
I mean, it would be like things that we treasure and value.
Yeah, that we treasure and value. But the added idea to that is that it's actually not as important as what we think it is. Yeah. So I'm looking for the English sort of term for that. 011-883-0702. Give us your call. Let me take some calls. Ntate Lesego is in Benoni. Ntate Lesego, good evening to you. Yeah, Ntate Lesego, we're losing you. But I think we get the essence of what you're saying. You're saying that you can't have the conversation about religion and spirituality in the same sort of sentence because they are vastly different ideas that cannot be reconciled. Hold on. I'm just paraphrasing what you're saying so that we can be able to deal with what you're saying. And secondly, you're saying that that Africans are just spiritual and not religious. All right. All right. No problem. I think we got what you said. Ntate Lesego in Benoni. How do you respond to Ntate Lesego?
I would say thank you first for tuning in and contributing to the conversation. I would say that religion, in the case that I'm also presenting, umthetho, you know, there's laws of nature. Just like at home, the children have to know how you want them to behave so that they can become productive, successful human beings.
Yeah.
And so in this sense, when we say religion, we're talking about codes of conduct, guidelines that cultivate a human soul to their divine potential. So the other sense of Constantine and creating institutions of religion is another form where people were formalizing, making schools of how to learn about God. But if we understand in all cultures, there's the supreme, there's the divine, there's the source of all energies. And in all cultures, including African culture, we're trying to connect to that. And so in our discussion, when we speak of religion, we are not trying to promote the institutionalization of learning about divinity. Nor are we condoning the fact that it was used as a tool to colonize and to subjugate certain populations. We're saying let us not be robbed of a need that is there within all living beings to connect. Let us see how the two can serve each other. So there shouldn't be too much of a feeling that we cannot. Here we are discussing religion and spirituality. And in fact, it is not, there's no big disconnect when we look at it as an evolution of consciousness. That there must be primary school where we may not be properly aligned with all that is available in terms of education, but we must grow. And when we've really matured, then we are able to connect always, in all circumstances. We can see in religion, in politics, in education, in technology, the essences.
It's talk to Ndebeng in Rudaport. Hi, Ndebeng. Ndebeng in Rudaport. Swuda?
Thank you, Ndebeng, for your observations. Very mature and sort of broad outlook, because we really want to encourage essentially that we must look at the dignity, divinity, and absolute responsibility of all individuals. So we are not just bystanders in our own lives. Whatever we are doing, however we are thinking, however we are seeing, will impact us. So we will do well when we start to make the connections of ourselves to other living beings, ourselves with our mind, ourselves to the action and reaction of what we do. Our own thoughts, they impact us. So sometimes we're looking for the enemy, the adversary, but then the enemy is actually ourselves. So there's a lot to gain when we really try to see the unity in the diversity. Sometimes it's very profitable to keep people in silos and to highlight a lot of differences. But when we grow in spirituality, we start to see that we are all living beings. And then we start to see we are all experiencing this earth practically in the same ways: hunger, thirst, old age, disease, stress. These are not unique to any of us. And so we should look for technologies that will help us to deal with life as it presents itself to us, and also strive to gain that which we always hanker for: unconditional love. We don't want to die. We want infinite knowledge. Why do we want these things? That's because these things are known to us in our essence. And we should encourage people to pursue that, regardless of what the process is called, what the religion is called. And just one last thing would be, if I have a counterfeit 100 Rand note, I will not give up on money just because I came across a fake 100 Rand note. A fake 100 Rand note tells me there's an original, there's a real 100 Rand note. So also in the spiritual or religious marketplace, there will be a lot of things that may pollute that experience: politics, business interests, selfishness, people concocting things. People should not be discouraged to pursue their spiritual needs or those internal needs that you mentioned.
Nare is in Blegari. Hi, Nare. Nare. Let's stay with the topic, my brother. Let's talk about religion and spirituality. Let me say this. First of all, it wasn't my guest who came up with the issue of Constantine. It was a caller who raised the issue of Constantine. And Constantine is a historical figure, understood in a specific way by different people. But the conversation is really not about Constantine at the moment. Tell us a little bit more about your understandings of spirituality, and let's leave the history lesson out of the conversation for a moment. Yeah. Nare in Blegari, much appreciated. Talk to me about dogma.
Dogma.
Talk to me about our need to be right.
It's a very strong one.
Talk to me about the psychology behind and how that relates to spirituality and religion. The need to be the custodian of all truth, to the exclusion of any other experience or thought. The monopoly of all knowledge that pervades over all things spiritual, and to say, my way or the highway. To what extent does that enter into the conversation about spirituality and religion? Because it's inadvertent. It's not inadvertent. It's inevitable. Every time this conversation is going to be had, somebody is going to say, "I am the holder of the true truth."
Yes,
it's inevitable. In fact, it came a little late. I was wondering why it was taking so long, but it came.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, that comes in that we spoke about exclusivists, pluralists, and inclusivists. So the exclusivist school tends to want to monopolize knowledge of the path and the way, what is the proper ritual, and so tends to look at others based on how much are they doing as I do. It comes from this need for individuals to feel that they are doing the right thing, and so they want to be on the right team, and it's a dualistic mentality. It's either wrong or right. They cannot see that many things can be right according to the perspective from which they are being approached. So I would say the unlimited source of all energies, how can we then limit how they express themselves in the unlimited lives of so many souls?
I have had the pleasure of studying a number of teachings of a number of sages, of people that were spiritually elevated from various cultures. From here in our own continent, people such as Credo Motwa. Anyway, because just now I'll be accused of it. But the point I'm trying to make is that none of them, not one of them, pushes the agenda. Yeah, none of them pushes the agenda that there is no other way of seeing things. I liked what you said earlier, and that's why I said, say it again. When you said that the person speaking to a people speaks at the level at which those people need to understand this particular concept. So for example, you spoke of grade 1 children who are studying mathematics versus grade 12 children who are studying mathematics versus students at the universities who are studying high mathematics. Same subject, but different levels at which it is articulated by those who understand it to those who must learn it. I'm beginning to understand this truth. That when we isolate truth to our experience, whether as a man, whether as a woman, whether as a European, whether as an African, we take away from the message of what mathematics is. And we want to give the impression that mathematics, all of mathematics, is grade 1 mathematics, or grade 12 mathematics, or university mathematics. When in fact, if I understand you correctly, it is all mathematics.
Beautiful.
It is only at which standard are you of the understanding of this big subject called mathematics. As we close,
I would just say one thing also, that my teacher is then, in my attempt to glorify them, then I say is the only teacher. Then we fight based on those that we revere. And it's not a problem to love your teacher if they are benefiting you. But you cannot impose your teacher on other people's schools.
Experience.
They have their own teachers, they have their own ways of being. So we have to expand our vision of each other and our vision of this deep subject of life.
how do people get in touch with you? I'm always so moved whenever I talk to you. Tell me how we get in touch with you.
You can get me on YouTube, on Instagram as Savia the Monk, Savya the Monk.
Savia the Monk, Savia the Guru, Guru Smuda. It's been great talking to you, my brother. Much appreciated. Let's take a break. When we come back, I'm going to snooze.
Bongani Bingwa, 702 breakfast.
I was actually surprised that they hadn't come out earlier. If it's not the Africanists, it's the Christians. If it's not the Christians, it's the Muslims.
It's like there's this aversion to
Conversation.
that you can't have your experiences. They're not valid if they're not
Mine.
And it's just it's sad and it limits us.
Absolutely. So if you're and the Africanists are the recent ones.
You should come emboldened now.
Yes, usually it's the Christians, but I see the Africans have now come out very strong.
Yeah.
Let's take a picture, my brother. You sit over there. I must take a picture.